The stars looked peaceful through the observation window of the horizon's edge. Commander Lucas Bennett stood there, watching the distant galaxies while his crew worked behind him. They had been traveling for 3 months now, mapping new star systems that no human had ever seen before. It was supposed to be a simple mission. Just look around, take notes, and go home. Nothing dangerous, nothing exciting. Just science and exploration. Lucas was a tall man with short brown hair and calm eyes. He had been in the Space Exploration Corps for 15 years. He knew how to handle problems in space, how to fix broken equipment, and how to keep his crew safe. His team trusted him completely. They were good people, each one trained for different tasks on the ship. Amy Rodriguez worked as their communications officer. She was young but smart, always making sure their messages reached Earth properly. Peter Walsh handled navigation, plotting courses through space with careful precision. The other crew members took care of engineering, science, and daily operations. They all worked together like a family. That morning started like any other day in space. The crew ate breakfast together in the small dining area. They talked about the new planet they had discovered yesterday. It had 3 moons and beautiful blue clouds. Peter joked about naming it after his grandmother. Amy laughed and said the naming committee back on Earth would never approve it. Lucas smiled but stayed quiet. He was thinking about their route home. They would start heading back to Earth in 2 more weeks. Then everything changed in an instant. The ship's alarms screamed to life. Red lights flashed throughout every corridor. Lucas ran to the bridge faster than he had ever run before. His crew was already there, staring at the screens with wide eyes full of fear. Peter's hand shook as he pointed at the display showing 3 massive ships appearing from nowhere. They were huge, each one 10 times larger than the horizon's edge. Lucas had never seen ships like these before. They were dark gray with sharp angles and strange symbols glowing on their hulls. They looked like they were built for war, not exploration. Within seconds, the 3 alien vessels surrounded them completely. There was no way to run, no way to hide. They were trapped. Amy tried to send a distress signal back to Earth. Her fingers flew across the control panel, typing emergency codes as fast as she could. But before she could finish, something hit their ship hard. The lights flickered and went out. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in dim red light. All their communication systems went dead. Their engines stopped working. Even their weapons, which were small and meant only for protection from asteroids, would not respond. Lucas felt his heart pounding, but forced himself to stay calm. His crew needed him to be strong right now. He ordered everyone to stay at their stations and wait. Maybe these aliens wanted to talk. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding. But deep inside, he knew better. Ships that looked like that did not appear just to say hello. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hull. Something was boarding their ship. Lucas heard metal tearing and breaking near the cargo bay. He told his crew to move together, to stay close. They gathered in the cargo bay because there was nowhere else to go. The ship was small and the aliens were already inside. The cargo bay door exploded inward with a sound like thunder. Smoke filled the air. Through the gray clouds, Lucas saw them. The aliens were enormous, standing at least 8 feet tall. They had hard shells covering their bodies like armor made of bone. Forearms extended from each one, ending in long claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. Their faces had no expressions that Lucas could understand. Just dark eyes that seemed to see everything. There were at least 20 of them. They moved into the cargo bay like trained soldiers, weapons raised and ready. Lucas counted them quickly, looking for any weakness, any chance to fight back. But he knew it was hopeless. His crew had no weapons. They were scientists and explorers, not soldiers. Amy made a sound like a cry and tried to run back to the communications room. Maybe she thought she could still send that signal, still call for help. One of the aliens moved faster than anything that big should be able to move. It struck her with the back of one massive hand. Amy flew backward and hit the wall hard. She crumpled to the floor and did not move. Lucas felt anger burning in his chest but forced it down. Getting angry now would get them all killed. Peter was smarter. He quietly moved toward a control panel on the wall. Lucas knew what he was thinking. That panel could overload the ship's power core. It would destroy the horizon's edge and everyone on it, but it would take these aliens with them. It would stop them from learning about Earth, from finding out where humans came from. It might save their whole planet from these creatures. But Peter never made it. An alien grabbed him from behind with 2 of its forearms. Peter struggled and fought, but he looked like a child compared to the massive creature. Another alien stepped forward and did something to the control panel. Sparks flew and the panel went dark. That option was gone now. One by one, the aliens grabbed the crew members. Some of them fought. Some of them screamed. None of it mattered. Within minutes, 5 members of Lucas's crew were on the floor, either unconscious or held down by the powerful aliens. Lucas stood in the center of the cargo bay, the only one still on his feet. He had his hands raised over his head in surrender. The largest alien walked toward him. This one had different markings on its shell, symbols that probably meant it was in charge. It looked at Lucas the way a human might look at an insect. Curious but not impressed, not worried. Just examining something small and weak. Lucas stared back at the creature. He did not look away. He did not beg or plead. He just watched and waited, his mind already working on the problem. These aliens had captured them easily. They had technology far beyond what humans possessed. They were strong and fast and organized. But they had also made one critical mistake. They had assumed that humans were weak. They had assumed that capturing them would be easy and staying in control would be even easier. They thought Lucas was just another primitive creature from another primitive world. They had no idea what humans were really like. They had no idea what Lucas Bennett was capable of when someone threatened his crew and his world. The alien leader made a sound that might have been speech. The other aliens began dragging the crew toward their ships. Lucas did not resist when 2 of them grabbed his arms. He let them take him. He went quietly, his face blank and calm. But inside his mind, he was already planning, already counting, already preparing for what came next. As they pulled him through the torn doorway of his ship, Lucas took one last look at the horizon's edge. He had been her commander for 3 years. She was a good ship. Now she was broken and empty. But Lucas made himself a promise right then. These aliens thought they had won. They thought capturing humans would be easy. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The alien ships were cold and dark inside. They put Lucas in a small room made of some kind of crystal that glowed with pale blue light. The walls were smooth and hard. There was no door that he could see, just a solid barrier that appeared after they pushed him inside. He was alone now, separated from his crew. He did not know if they were alive or dead. He did not know where these aliens were taking him, but Lucas Bennett was not afraid. He was thinking, planning, waiting for his chance. The aliens had made their first mistake when they attacked his ship. They would make more mistakes, and when they did, Lucas would be ready. He sat down in the center of the crystal cell and began to count the hours, memorizing every detail of his prison, learning everything he could about his captors. The first human they captured would teach them a lesson they would never forget. The alien ship traveled through space for what felt like days. Lucas had no way to measure time in his crystal cell. There were no windows, no clocks, nothing to mark the passing hours except his own counting. He counted his heartbeats. He counted his breaths. He did exercises to keep his body strong and his mind sharp. Most importantly, he watched everything. Every few hours, one of the aliens would walk past his cell. Lucas studied them carefully. He noticed how they moved, which arms they used more, often, where their shells looked thicker and where they seemed thinner. He watched the way they interacted with each other, trying to understand their hierarchy and communication. He noticed that some had more symbols on their shells than others. Those were probably the leaders or more experienced soldiers. The aliens brought him food once a day. It was a gray paste that tasted like nothing but provided nutrition. They pushed it through a small opening that appeared in the crystal wall, and then sealed shut immediately. Lucas ate it all. He needed his strength. He needed to be ready when opportunity came. On what he estimated was the 5th day, the ship finally stopped. Lucas felt the change in motion, the subtle shift that meant they had arrived somewhere. The crystal wall of his cell suddenly became transparent, and he could see outside for the first time since his capture. What he saw made him take a sharp breath. They were approaching a massive space station. It hung in orbit around a gray, dead moon with no atmosphere. The station was enormous, shaped like a giant ring with dozens of spokes connecting to a central hub. Lights glowed across its surface in patterns Lucas did not understand. Smaller ships came and went from docking ports all around the structure. This was not just a military base. This was something bigger. A detention center, perhaps. A prison. Lucas realized with cold certainty that he was not the first prisoner these aliens had taken. This station had been built to hold captives from many worlds. How many other species had they conquered? How many other civilizations had they destroyed or enslaved? The thought made Lucas angry, but he pushed the emotion away. Anger was useless right now. He needed to think clearly. The ship docked with the station smoothly. The crystal wall became solid again, hiding the view. Minutes later, guards came for him. 6 of them this time, taking no chances. They pulled him from the cell roughly and pushed him down a long corridor. Lucas did not resist. He walked calmly, but his eyes took in every detail. He counted doorways. He noted the color coding on the walls that probably indicated different sections. He memorized the route they were taking. They brought him to an interrogation room. It was a large space with harsh lights that hurt his eyes after days in the dim crystal cell. In the center of the room was a chair made of the same material as his cell. They forced him into it, and the chair immediately formed restraints around his wrists and ankles. The restraints were strong but not painful. These aliens wanted information, not suffering. At least not yet. The guards left, and Lucas was alone in the bright room for several minutes. He tested the restraints carefully. They were solid. No way to break them with strength alone. He would need to be smarter than that. He looked around the room, noting the positions of what might be cameras or sensors in the ceiling. Everything he did was being watched. He needed to remember that. The door opened, and a new alien entered. This one was different from the guards. It moved more slowly, more deliberately. Its shell had intricate patterns carved into it, and it wore something that might have been clothing or decoration around what passed for its neck. This was the interrogator. The creature sat across from Lucas, or at least positioned itself in what might have been sitting for their species. It looked at him with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then it spoke. To Lucas's surprise, the words came out in English. Not perfect English, but understandable. The aliens had translation technology. They had probably been listening to the communications from the horizon's edge before they attacked. The interrogator's name was something Lucas could not pronounce. It sounded like rocks grinding together. The creature asked him questions in a calm, patient voice. What was his name? Where did he come from? What was his ship doing in this region of space? Lucas answered some questions truthfully. He told them his name. He told them about Earth, describing it as a single planet with a divided population and limited space travel capability. He made humanity sound weak, isolated, and technologically primitive. The interrogator seemed satisfied with these answers. It asked about military strength. Lucas lied smoothly, describing Earth's defenses as minimal and outdated. He talked about the internal conflicts between nations, making it sound like humanity could never unite against an external threat. The interrogator made notes on a device it held in one of its 4 hands. Then Lucas began asking his own questions. He asked about the station. How big was it? How many prisoners did they hold? The interrogator found this amusing. It actually made a sound that might have been laughter. It told Lucas that the station held over 3,000 prisoners from 40 different species. It had been in operation for 30 years. No one had ever escaped. Security was perfect. Lucas asked about the guards. How many were there? When did they change shifts? The interrogator answered these questions too, clearly not seeing Lucas as any kind of threat. It told him there were 500 guards on the station, working in rotating shifts every 8 hours. The guards were all highly trained warriors from the Crithian military. That was what these aliens called themselves. Crithians. Over the next several days, they brought Lucas back to the interrogation room 3 more times. Each time, the interrogator asked more questions and Lucas answered carefully. He gave them information that sounded detailed but was actually useless. He described Earth's geography, its weather patterns, its animal life. He talked about human history and culture. He made himself seem cooperative and broken, but all the while he was learning. He learned that the Crithian Empire had conquered dozens of worlds. They saw themselves as the superior species in the galaxy, destined to rule over all others. They took prisoners to learn about new species before deciding whether to enslave them, or simply take their resources and leave them broken. They were thorough, methodical, and confident in their power. Lucas also learned about the station's layout. The interrogator mentioned different sections casually, assuming Lucas would never need this information. There was a central control room in the hub. The prison cells were arranged in the outer ring. The guard barracks and armory were on level 7 of the central structure. The power core that ran everything was deep in the lower levels, heavily protected. Most importantly, Lucas learned about their weakness. The Crithians had never faced serious resistance. Every species they encountered either surrendered quickly or was crushed easily. They had protocols for interrogation and imprisonment, but no real protocols for a full prisoner revolt. Why would they? It had never happened before. Their confidence had made them careless. During the third interrogation, Lucas saw an opportunity. A guard had come too close within arm's reach. The creature was bored, not paying full attention. For just a moment, Lucas considered making his move right then, but he stopped himself. It was too early. There were too many guards outside. The restraints were still active. He needed to be patient a little longer. On the fourth interrogation, Lucas asked permission to see his crew. He made his voice sound weak and defeated. He said he just wanted to know they were alive. The interrogator considered this request and then agreed. It told him that his crew was in the general population area, recovering from their capture. They were being held in cells nearby. This information was exactly what Lucas needed to know. When they took him back to his cell that day, Lucas noticed something new. A small vent in the ceiling of the corridor they walked through. It was barely visible, just a thin grate that probably led to the station's ventilation system. Most prisoners would never think about it. Most prisoners were kept weak and scared, never given the chance to observe their surroundings clearly. But Lucas had been observing everything. He had been planning and preparing. He knew the layout of this section now. He knew where the guards were stationed. He knew when they changed shifts. He knew where his crew was being held. And now he knew there was a ventilation system that probably connected different parts of the station. That night, lying in his crystal cell under the dim blue light, Lucas made his final plans. Tomorrow, during the next interrogation, he would make his move. It would be dangerous. It would probably be his only chance. If he failed, they would kill him. But if he succeeded, he could do more than just escape. He could hurt these creatures who thought they were so superior. He could send a message that would echo across their entire empire. Lucas closed his eyes and ran through the plan one more time in his mind. Every step, every movement, every possible reaction from the guards. He visualized it all, preparing himself mentally and physically for what was coming. He thought about his crew, still imprisoned somewhere on this station. He thought about Earth, so far away and vulnerable. He thought about all the other species these Crithians had conquered and enslaved. Tomorrow, everything would change. The Crithians thought they had captured a weak, primitive human. The guards came for Lucas at what he estimated was morning on the station. They walked with the same confidence they always had, expecting him to be docile and cooperative like he had been for days. Lucas stood when they opened his cell and walked between them without resistance. His heart was beating fast, but his face remained calm. Everything depended on the next few minutes. They took him down the familiar corridor toward the interrogation room. Lucas counted his steps, timing everything perfectly in his mind. 30 steps from his cell to the first turn, 20 more to the ventilation grate he had spotted, 15 more to the interrogation room door. He had walked this path 4 times now. He knew every centimeter. The guard on his right was slightly shorter than the one on his left. That one also favored its rear left arm when holding its weapon. Lucas had noticed it shifting the gun between hands during previous walks, as if that arm got tired more easily. That meant weakness in the shoulder joint, probably an old injury that had not healed properly. The guard on his left was bigger and stronger, but it walked with its head up, looking forward rather than watching the prisoner. Overconfident. They reached the spot Lucas had been waiting for, right below the ventilation grate. right between the two cameras where there was a tiny blind spot he had calculated. Lucas took a deep breath and moved. He spun toward the right guard faster than either Crithian expected. His elbow drove up and into the exact spot where the creature's shell plates met at the shoulder joint. Lucas had spent days studying Crithian anatomy during interrogations, watching how they moved, identifying the weak points in their natural armor. His strike landed perfectly. The guard made a sound like metal screeching. Its arm went limp and the weapon clattered to the floor. Lucas was already moving, dropping low and sweeping his leg behind the guard's knee joint. The massive creature fell backward, and Lucas caught its weapon before it could hit the ground. It was heavy and designed for 4-fingered hands, but Lucas had practiced the grip in his mind 100 times. His fingers found the trigger mechanism. The second guard was fast, already raising its own weapon. But Lucas was faster. He fired once, the alien gun making a sound like ripping fabric. The energy bolt caught the guard in the face right where its eyes were. The creature dropped instantly. Lucas did not wait to see if it was dead. He was already jumping, using the fallen guard's body as a platform to reach the ventilation grate. His fingers grabbed the grate and pulled. It came loose with a grinding sound. The opening was small, barely big enough for a human, definitely too small for a Crithian. Lucas threw the stolen weapon through the opening first, then pulled himself up. His shoulders scraped against the metal walls of the vent, but he forced his body through. Behind him, he heard alarms beginning to wail throughout the station. The ventilation system was dark and narrow. Lucas pulled himself forward on his elbows, moving as fast as the confined space allowed. He could hear sounds below him, Crithian voices shouting orders, feet pounding on the floors. They knew he had escaped. They would be sealing sections, deploying guards to every corridor. But they would be looking in the wrong places. They would never expect a prisoner to go deeper into the station instead of trying to reach the hangar bays. Lucas had memorized the station layout from everything the interrogator had told him. The ventilation system connected all the major sections, because the Crithians needed to maintain atmosphere throughout the massive structure. Lucas crawled through the ducts, counting intersections, taking specific turns. Left at the third junction, straight through the next section. Right when he felt the air getting warmer, he was heading toward the central hub. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Lucas reached his first objective. Through a grate below him, he could see the central control room. 3 Crithian technicians sat at various stations, monitoring screens that showed different parts of the prison. They were talking urgently to each other, clearly dealing with the alarm his escape had triggered. None of them thought to look up. Lucas waited above them, watching and listening. He learned that they had sealed off the outer ring where the cells were located. They had guards searching every corridor in that section. They had security teams stationed at all the hangar bays, expecting him to try stealing a ship. They had done exactly what he predicted they would do. They were so confident in their security that they could not imagine a prisoner doing anything except running for the nearest escape route. Lucas carefully removed the grate, setting it aside silently. The control room was 10 feet below him. He would have to drop, and he would have to be perfect. 3 targets, 3 seconds at most before they could raise an alarm or grab weapons. He took a breath, said a silent prayer to whoever might be listening, and dropped. He landed behind the first technician and struck it in the back of the neck, right where the spine connected to the skull. The creature slumped forward over its console. The second technician was turning, its mouth opening to shout. Lucas grabbed its head with both hands and twisted hard. Crithian necks were stronger than human necks, but the principle was the same. The vertebrae separated with a crack that made Lucas feel sick, but he could not afford mercy right now. The third technician was reaching for a communication device. Lucas crossed the room in 2 strides and caught its arm. He pulled the creature off balance and used its own momentum to slam its head into the edge of the console. Once. Twice. The technician stopped moving. Lucas stood in the control room, breathing hard. His hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline. He had just killed 3 beings, something he had never done before in his life. He was an explorer, not a soldier. But these creatures were part of an empire that conquered and enslaved other species. They would have done the same to Earth if given the chance. Lucas pushed the guilt away. He could deal with his feelings later. Right now, he had work to do. He sat at the main console and began working through the control systems. The Crithian writing was strange, but the layout was logical. Every species used similar designs for computer interfaces. He found the prison control section and began systematically opening cell doors. Block after block, hundreds of cells unlocking at once. He could see on the monitors as prisoners began emerging from their cells, confused and frightened. Lucas activated the station's communication system. He spoke clearly in English, hoping the translation technology would convert his words to languages the other prisoners could understand. His message was simple: fight now or die as slaves later. The armory is on level 7. Follow me or find your own way to freedom. On the monitors, Lucas watched chaos spreading through the station. Some prisoners ran immediately toward the hangar bays, desperate to escape. But others, warriors from various species, began moving toward the central hub. They understood what Lucas was offering them. Not just escape, but revenge. A chance to strike back at their captors. Lucas downloaded a copy of the station's complete layout to a small data device he found at one of the consoles. Then he destroyed the control systems, smashing them with a heavy tool he grabbed from a maintenance kit. The Crithians would not be able to use this room to track him or lock down sections remotely anymore. He left the control room and made his way down through the central hub. The station was in complete chaos now. Alarms screamed everywhere. He could hear weapons fire in the distance. Prisoners fighting guards trying to restore order. Lucas moved quickly but carefully, following the route he had memorized to level 7. He encountered a group of guards rushing toward the control room. There were 5 of them, too many to fight directly. Lucas hid in a side corridor and waited until they passed. Then he shot the last one in the back. The others turned, and Lucas was already running, leading them away from the armory. He took them through a maze of corridors using his memorized map to stay ahead. When he reached a section he knew had heavy blast doors, he triggered the emergency lockdown for that section. The door slammed shut, trapping the guards on the other side. Lucas finally reached level 7. The armory was ahead, a large reinforced door with 2 guards posted outside. They saw him coming and raised their weapons. Lucas dove behind a corner as energy bolts burned the air where he had been standing. He leaned out and fired back, not trying to hit them but keeping them pinned down. Then help arrived. A massive alien creature, easily 9 feet tall with gray skin and 4 eyes, came charging from the opposite direction. It roared and crashed into one of the guards like a living battering ram. Lucas recognized the species from the prison monitors. Vorlaxian, a warrior race that the Crithians had conquered years ago. This one had taken Lucas's message to heart. Together, Lucas and the Vorlaxian overpowered the guards. The big alien held one down while Lucas shot the lock on the armory door. The door hissed open, revealing rows and rows of weapons. Crithian guns designed for their 4-handed grip, but also weapons taken from other species, simpler designs that Lucas could use. More prisoners arrived, dozens of them, then hundreds. Lucas organized them quickly, giving orders in a calm voice that somehow cut through the chaos. He assigned weapons based on what each species could effectively use. He divided them into groups, each with a specific target. Some would secure the hangar. The detention station transformed into a war zone within minutes. Lucas stood in the armory coordinating teams of freed prisoners as they grabbed weapons and rushed out to fight. The Vorlaxian warrior, who told Lucas his name was Crix, became his second in command. Crix had military training from before his people were conquered. He understood tactics and could translate Lucas's orders to species who did not understand English. Lena Harper proved invaluable. She knew the Crithian computer systems better than anyone, because she had been forced to work in their data processing center during her imprisonment. She took control of a portable terminal and started hacking into what remained of the station systems. Within minutes, she had maps showing guard positions and security checkpoints. She fed this information to Lucas, who adjusted his strategy accordingly. The first major clash happened near the guard barracks on level 7. 100 Crithian warriors had gathered there, preparing to launch a coordinated counterattack. Lucas knew he could not let them organize. He sent Crix with 50 of the strongest fighters to hit them hard and fast. The Vorlaxian led the charge with a battle cry that shook the walls. The fight was brutal. Crithians were naturally stronger than most species, and these were trained soldiers. But they were fighting in confined corridors where numbers mattered more than individual strength. The freed prisoners had rage on their side, years of imprisonment and abuse fueling every strike. Lucas heard the sounds of combat echoing through the station. Screams, weapon fire, metal crashing against shell. While Crix kept the main Crithian force busy, Lucas led a smaller team toward the power core. This group included Lena and a dozen others who were smart and quick, rather than physically strong. They moved through maintenance tunnels and service corridors, avoiding the main fighting. Lucas needed to reach the core before the Crithians realized what he was planning. They encountered scattered resistance, individual guards or small patrols who tried to stop them. Lucas and his team dealt with each encounter swiftly. He had become efficient at killing, though it still made him feel hollow inside. These Crithians were just soldiers following orders, but they were also part of an empire built on conquest and slavery. He could not afford to hesitate. The power core was deep in the lower levels of the station, protected by heavy doors and multiple security systems. Lena worked on bypassing the locks while Lucas and the others stood guard. She muttered to herself as she worked, her fingers flying over the Crithian controls. Sweat dripped down her face despite the cool temperature. The security on this section was much heavier than anything else they had encountered. A group of Crithian guards appeared at the end of the corridor. They saw Lucas's team and opened fire immediately. Energy bolts lit up the hallway. One of Lucas's fighters, a reptilian creature from a species he did not know, took a hit and went down. Lucas returned fire, forcing the guards to take cover. They were stuck in a standoff, neither side able to advance. Lena shouted that she had almost bypassed the door. Just 30 more seconds. Lucas knew they did not have 30 seconds. More guards would be arriving soon. He made a decision. He told his team to cover him and then ran directly at the Crithian position. It was insane, suicidal. The guards were bigger, stronger, and had better cover. But Lucas was fast and unpredictable. He zigzagged as he ran, making himself a difficult target. He fired his weapon without aiming, just creating chaos. The guards hesitated, confused by this human running at them instead of taking cover. That hesitation cost them. Lucas reached their position and dove into the middle of them. At close range, in hand-to-hand combat, the Crithian size worked against them in the confined space. Lucas struck at joints and weak points, using every dirty fighting trick he had ever learned. He broke one guard's knee with a kick. He drove his weapon into another's eye. A third guard grabbed him with two of its forearms, but Lucas twisted and used the creature's own grip to throw it off balance. His team arrived seconds later, and together they finished the guards. Lucas stood among the bodies, breathing hard, covered in blood that was not his own. His hands would not stop shaking. But the door was open now. Lena had done it. They rushed into the power core chamber. The core itself was a massive sphere of glowing energy, held in place by magnetic fields and safety systems. It provided power for the entire station. Lena immediately went to the control terminal and began analyzing the systems. She explained to Lucas that she could overload the core, but it would take time to bypass all the safety protocols. Maybe an hour. Lucas shook his head. They did not have an hour. He needed something faster. He asked Lena if she could set up a delayed overload, something that would give prisoners time to evacuate but would still trap any Crithians who tried to stop it. She thought for a moment and then nodded. Yes, she could do that. 30 minutes until critical overload. Maybe 45 minutes until actual explosion. It would be enough time for the prisoners to reach the hangar bays and escape in stolen ships. Lena started working while Lucas contacted Crix through a communication device they had taken from a guard. The Vorlaxian reported that the fighting was spreading throughout the station. The prisoners were winning in many places, but the Crithians still controlled key sections. Crix asked about the next move. Lucas told him to start pulling everyone back toward the hangar bays. They were abandoning the station. Anyone who wanted freedom needed to be on a ship in 30 minutes, then everything changed. Lena's terminal started showing a new alert. A Crithian warship was approaching the station. Not just any warship. A command vessel, much larger than the ones that had brought prisoners here. Someone important was coming. Lucas felt his stomach drop. This was not part of the plan. Lena pulled up information on the approaching ship. It was the flagship of Commander Thexazar, one of the highest-ranking military leaders in the Crithian Empire. He was coming personally to deal with the prison revolt. The ship would dock in 15 minutes. It carried 200 elite Crithian warriors, the best soldiers in their military. Lucas stared at the screen. 200 elite warriors would overwhelm the freed prisoners. Even with weapons, most of the prisoners were weak from captivity and had no military training. They would be slaughtered. The escape would fail. Everything he had done would be for nothing. But then Lucas looked at the power core and an idea formed in his mind. A terrible, dangerous idea. He asked Lena if she could lock the docking mechanisms once Thexzar's ship connected to the station. She said yes, it would be easy to override those controls. Lucas asked if the overload could be accelerated. Could they make it explode in 20 minutes instead of 45? Lena hesitated. That would be cutting it very close for the evacuation. Some prisoners might not make it out in time. Lucas made the hardest decision of his life. He told Lena to do it. Lock the docking mechanisms. Accelerate the overload. 20 minutes until explosion. He would stay behind and make sure Thexzar could not stop it. The other prisoners would evacuate immediately. Crix would lead them to safety. Lena looked at him like he was crazy. This was a suicide plan. Lucas would die when the station exploded. But Lucas just smiled sadly and told her that someone had to make sure the Crithians took this revolt seriously. Someone had to send a message they would never forget. It might as well be him, Lena argued. She tried to find another way. But Lucas was firm. He ordered her to go, to help the others evacuate. She finally agreed, tears in her eyes. She finished setting up the overload sequence with multiple redundancies and passwords that only Lucas knew. Then she ran toward the hangar bays with the rest of the team. Lucas stayed in the power core chamber. He watched through the terminal as Thexzar's flagship docked with the station. He activated the docking lock as soon as the connection was secure. The Crithian ship was now trapped, unable to separate from the station. Through the security cameras, he watched as Thexzar led his elite warriors into the station. The Crithian commander was enormous, even larger than normal Crithians. His shell had elaborate carvings and decorations that marked him as high rank. He moved with absolute confidence, ordering his troops to fan out and crush the rebellion. He was heading toward the power core, probably guessing that was where Lucas would be. Smart creature. Arrogant but smart. Lucas prepared himself. He checked his weapon. He looked at the timer counting down on the power core. 18 minutes until overload. 18 minutes until this entire station became a ball of fire. He thought about his crew from the horizon's edge. He hoped they were among the prisoners evacuating. He thought about Earth so far away. He hoped the message he was about to send would reach them somehow, would warn them about the Crithians. He thought about his life. 42 years, not bad. He had explored new worlds, seen things no human had ever seen before. He had loved and lost and tried to be a good person. Now he was going to die stopping an empire that enslaved entire species. There were worse ways to go. The door to the power core chamber exploded inward. Thexzar entered with a dozen of his elite warriors. They saw Lucas standing calmly by the terminal, and they saw the overload warnings flashing on every screen. Thexzar understood immediately what was happening. He roared in fury and charged at Lucas. Lucas smiled and raised his weapon. The power core chamber became a battlefield. Lucas fired at the incoming Crithian warriors as they poured through the doorway. His shots were precise, aiming for the weak points he had spent days memorizing. One warrior fell with a shot to the eye. Another took a hit in the shoulder joint and dropped its weapon. But there were too many of them and they kept coming. Lucas dove behind a control console as return fire tore through the air where he had been standing. The energy bolts hit the wall behind him, leaving scorched marks on the metal. He leaned out and fired again, forcing the Crithians to spread out and take cover. He needed to buy time. The timer showed 17 minutes until overload. Thexzar bellowed orders in his own language. The elite warriors moved with military precision, advancing in pairs while others provided covering fire. These were not regular guards. These were professional soldiers who had fought in dozens of battles. They knew how to handle a single opponent, even one as dangerous as Lucas. Lucas realized he could not hold the doorway. There were too many angles of attack. He retreated deeper into the chamber, toward the power core itself. The massive sphere of energy hummed and crackled, the sound growing louder as the overload progressed. Warning lights flashed across every surface. The temperature was rising. Lucas could feel the heat on his skin. He positioned himself behind one of the magnetic containment pillars. It was thick enough to provide cover and close enough to the main terminal that he could protect it if needed. A Crithian warrior tried to rush his position. Lucas waited until it was close, then stepped out and fired at point-blank range. The warrior's shell cracked and it fell, but another immediately took its place. The fighting was fierce and fast. Lucas moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough for them to coordinate their fire. He used the equipment in the chamber as cover, sliding behind consoles, ducking under pipes, climbing over machinery. He made himself unpredictable, human instinct and improvisation against Crithian training and strength. But slowly, inevitably, the Crithians pushed him back. Lucas took a hit on his left arm. The energy bolt burned through his sleeve and scorched his skin. The pain was intense, but he ignored it. He took a hit on his leg. He stumbled but kept moving. His weapon power was running low. He had maybe a dozen shots left. Thexazar had stayed back, letting his warriors do the fighting. But now he stepped forward. Seeing that Lucas was wounded and weakening, the massive Crithian commander walked toward Lucas with complete confidence. He spoke in heavily accented English, his voice deep and resonating. "You are brave for a primitive species, but bravery means nothing. You cannot stop the inevitable. My warriors will kill you. My technicians will stop the overload. Your rebellion ends here." Lucas leaned against a console, breathing hard. Blood dripped from his wounds. He looked at Thexar and laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who knew something his enemy did not. "Your technicians can try, but Lena encrypted the shutdown codes, and I'm the only one who knows the passwords. You want to stop this? You'll have to come through me." Thexazar's eyes narrowed. He realized the trap. If he killed Lucas, the overload would continue unchecked. If he tried to force the passwords from Lucas, it would take time they did not have. The timer showed 14 minutes. His ship was locked to the station. His warriors were trapped here with him. For the first time, fear crossed the Crithian commander's face. Real fear. He screamed at his warriors to capture Lucas alive. They moved in from all sides, trying to surround him without killing him. Lucas knew this was his chance. He typed commands into the console he was leaning against. Additional safeties disabled. Overload accelerated further. 11 minutes now instead of 14. Thexazar saw what Lucas had done and roared in fury. He charged forward himself, all four arms reaching for the human. Lucas tried to dodge, but his wounded leg gave out. Thexazar caught him, lifting him off the ground with terrifying strength. The Crithian's grip was crushing. Lucas felt his ribs creaking under the pressure. "Tell me the password," Thexazar demanded. "Tell me now, or I will break every bone in your body." Lucas looked the alien commander directly in the eyes. He smiled despite the pain, and he spoke his final words to this creature who thought humans were weak and primitive. "Humans don't break. We adapt, we fight, we survive. And when you try to cage us, we make sure you regret it. This is your only warning to your empire. Stay away from Earth, stay away from humanity, or the first human you captured will not be the last one to make you pay." Then Lucas headbutted Thexazar as hard as he could. His skull crashed into the softer tissue around the Crithian's mouth. It was not enough to seriously hurt the massive alien, but it surprised him enough that his grip loosened. Lucas twisted free and dove for the main power terminal. Thexazar recovered and grabbed Lucas again, throwing him against the wall. Lucas hit hard and felt something break inside him. He coughed and blood came out, but he had reached the terminal first. With his last strength, he entered the final command. All remaining safeties disabled. Manual override locked with his biometric signature. The only way to stop the overload now was to kill Lucas and wait for his body to cool enough that his biosignature would no longer register. But that would take hours. The timer showed 8 minutes. Thexazar understood. His elite warriors understood. They were all dead. The station would explode and take them with it. The Crithian commander looked at Lucas with something that might have been respect mixed with hatred. "You sacrifice yourself for nothing," Thexazar said. "Your species will still fall. We will find your Earth. We will conquer it. Your death changes nothing." Lucas laughed again, a wet sound because of the blood in his lungs. He pulled himself up to sitting, leaning against the wall. The power core was screaming now, energy arcs shooting between the containment fields. The heat was becoming unbearable. Maybe you will find Earth, maybe you'll try to conquer it. But now you know what humans are capable of. Now you know that we will burn your empire down around you rather than submit. How many of your commanders will want to attack Earth after what happened here? How many of your soldiers will volunteer to fight humans after this story spreads? I'm not dying for nothing. I'm dying to buy my species time. Time to prepare. Time to unite. Time to build weapons that will make your empire wish it had never heard of humanity. Thexazar had no response to that. He looked at the timer. 6 minutes. He tried one last time to access the terminal, to find some way to override the system, but Lena had done her work too well. Every path was blocked. Every backup system was compromised. The station was going to die, and everyone still on it would die with it. Through the security monitors still functioning, Lucas could see the last evacuation ships leaving the hangar bays. Hundreds of prisoners escaping to freedom. Crix was on one of those ships, Lucas hoped. Lena, too. His crew from the horizon's edge, if they had survived this long. They would tell the story of what happened here. They would warn Earth. They would make sure his sacrifice meant something. Thexazar sat down across from Lucas. The Crithian commander had accepted his fate. His warriors had stopped trying to find a way out. They all just waited for the end. "What is your name, human?" Thexazar asked quietly. "Commander Lucas Bennett, Human Space Exploration Corps, Ship Horizon's Edge. I will remember it. In whatever afterlife awaits, I will remember the human who destroyed an entire Crithian military command." Lucas nodded. "And I'll remember you as the alien who learned too late that humans should not be underestimated." The timer reached 3 minutes. The power core was critical now, barely contained by the failing magnetic fields. Alarms were screaming. The temperature was like standing next to the sun. Lucas's vision was starting to fade. His wounds and the heat were taking him. He would probably die before the actual explosion. He thought about his parents on Earth. They would never know what happened to him. He thought about friends and lovers from years past. He thought about the stars he had explored and the wonders he had seen. It had been a good life. A short life, but a good one. The last thing Lucas saw before his eyes closed was the timer reaching 0. The last thing he heard was the power core beginning its final catastrophic failure. The last thing he felt was satisfaction. He had done it. He had sent the message. The Crithian Empire would remember Commander Lucas Bennett, and they would think twice before ever capturing another human. The detention station exploded with the force of a small star-going supernova. The blast completely destroyed the facility and Thexazar's flagship. The shockwave swept across the dead moon below, turning the surface to glass. From a distance it must have looked beautiful. A brief, brilliant flash of light in the darkness of space, and then nothing. Just debris and silence. The freed prisoners watched from their stolen ships, now safely beyond the blast radius. Lena Harper stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, tears streaming down her face. Crix stood beside her, placing a massive hand gently on her shoulder. Around them, hundreds of freed slaves from dozens of species watched the explosion in awed silence. Lucas Bennett had given them their freedom. He had given them hope. He had shown them that even the mighty Crithian Empire could be hurt, could be made to pay for their crimes. One human captured and imprisoned had brought down. The news of the detention station's destruction reached the Crithian High Command 3 days later. At first, they dismissed the reports as errors or exaggerations. A prison station did not just explode. Prisoners did not revolt and win. It was impossible. Their security was perfect. Their warriors were undefeated. Something else must have happened. A reactor malfunction. A terrorist attack from a rival empire. Anything except what the surviving data log suggested. But as more information came in, the truth became undeniable. A single prisoner had escaped. That prisoner had freed others. Together, they had overwhelmed the guards, stolen weapons, and triggered a core overload. Commander Thexazar and his entire elite command unit had been killed. 200 of the Crithian Empire's best warriors gone in a flash of light. The High Command convened an emergency session in their capital city on the Crithian homeworld. 12 of the most powerful leaders in the Empire gathered around a circular table carved from black stone. They reviewed every piece of data recovered from the station's backup systems. They watched security footage of Lucas Bennett fighting. They read transcripts of his interrogations. They analyzed everything, trying to understand how this had happened. One of the council members, an ancient Crithian named Zexthal, watched the footage of Lucas in combat. He saw the human move with speed and intelligence, adapting to every situation, finding weaknesses in Crithian anatomy that even most Crithians did not know existed. He saw Lucas organizing hundreds of different species into an effective fighting force. He saw a level of tactical thinking that impressed even Zexthal, who had commanded armies for 50 years. This human is not normal for his species, one council member argued. He must be special. Enhanced somehow. They're military elite. We should not judge all humans by this one example. But Zexthal shook his head slowly. He had studied the interrogation records carefully. Lucas Bennett was an explorer, not a soldier. He was a scientist, A ship commander who had never seen real combat before his capture. He had no genetic enhancements, no cybernetic implants, nothing that made him physically superior to other humans. He was, by all accounts, an average member of his species. If this is their average, Zexthal said quietly, then what are their soldiers like? That question hung in the air like a death sentence. The council members looked at each other, and for the first time in the Empire's long history, they felt something unfamiliar. Fear. They pulled up all available information on humanity. There was not much. Earth was far from Krathian territory, on the edge of explored space. The Horizon's Edge had been one of the first human ships to reach this far out, but what little information they had was concerning. Humans came from a death world. Their planet had extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases that would kill most other species. They had evolved as hunters, predators themselves, with forward-facing eyes and omnivorous diets. Their history was filled with constant warfare. They fought each other with shocking brutality, developing increasingly destructive weapons, nuclear bombs, biological weapons, chemical warfare. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times, but always pulled back at the last moment. And yet they also showed remarkable cooperation when threatened externally. Their world wars had ended with global alliances. They had established international organizations. They had spread across their solar system despite limited technology. Driven by curiosity and ambition, they were divided, yes, but they could unite when necessary. The council debated for hours. Some members wanted to launch a preemptive strike on Earth, to destroy humanity before they became a threat. Others argued for avoiding human space entirely. A few suggested trying to establish diplomatic relations, though that idea was quickly dismissed as weakness. Finally, Zexthal stood and silenced the debate with a gesture. He was the oldest and most respected member of the council. When he spoke, everyone listened. We will not attack Earth. We will not enter human territory. We will establish a buffer zone of 50 light-years around all known human colonies. Any ship that encounters humans is to avoid engagement and report immediately. This directive is classified at the highest level, but it will be followed absolutely. The other council members protested. This was unprecedented. The Krathian Empire did not run from anyone. They were the conquerors, the dominant species in this region of space. To avoid an entire species based on one incident was cowardice. But Zexthal explained his reasoning. One human destroyed a fortified military station and killed a command unit. One human organized a successful prison revolt against odds that should have been impossible. One human forced Commander Thexazar, a warrior who had conquered 12 worlds, to die in fear and helplessness. If humans are this dangerous as explorers and prisoners, what will they be like as enemies? What will they do if we give them a reason to unite against us? He paused and looked at each council member in turn. We are strong, yes. We have conquered many species, but every empire falls eventually. I do not want the Krathian Empire to fall because we were too arrogant to recognize a threat when we saw one. Let the humans develop in peace. Let them remain distant, and pray to whatever gods exist that they never decide to come looking for revenge. The council reluctantly agreed. The directive was issued. Krathian ships would avoid human space. The story of Lucas Bennett and the detention station was classified, but like all classified information, it leaked. Within months, Krathian soldiers throughout the Empire were talking about the human prisoner who had killed Commander Thexazar. The story grew in the telling, becoming darker and more frightening. Meanwhile, the freed prisoners spread across the galaxy. They carried the story with them. Different species heard different versions, but the core message was always the same. A human had refused to surrender. A human had fought back against impossible odds. A human had given his life to save others and to send a warning to an empire. Lena Harper made it her mission to warn Earth. She and the other freed humans traveled together, finding their way through neutral space, trading information and labor for passage on various ships. It took them 6 months to reach the outer colonies of human space. When they finally arrived, they told their story to anyone who would listen. Earth's governments initially dismissed the tales as exaggeration or propaganda, but Lena had brought data files from the Krathian station. She had evidence. She had witnessed testimony from dozens of species. She had detailed information about Krathian technology, tactics, and territory. Most importantly, she had Lucas Bennett's final message recorded from the station's systems. The recording showed Lucas in the power core chamber, wounded and dying, speaking his last words to Thexar. It showed his determination, his defiance, his willingness to sacrifice everything for a species he would never see again. When that recording was played for Earth's leaders, everything changed. For the first time in human history, the nations of Earth truly united. Not completely, not without arguments and disputes. But they recognized the threat. They understood that somewhere out there was an empire that conquered and enslaved other species, an empire that had learned to fear humanity, but might not stay fearful forever. Earth began to build. Weapons, ships, defenses, they established military alliances with nearby colonies. They developed faster-than-light communication networks. They trained soldiers and prepared for a war that might come in years or decades or never. But they would be ready. Lucas Bennett became a symbol. Statues were erected in his honor. His name was taught in schools. The anniversary of the detention station's destruction became a memorial day. Children were told stories about the explorer who became a warrior, who saved hundreds of alien prisoners and bought his species time to prepare for the future. Crix, the Vorlaxian who had fought beside Lucas, traveled to Earth 5 years after the incident. He came to pay his respects and to meet Lucas's family. He told them everything, every detail of their son's final days. He told them how Lucas had inspired hundreds of prisoners from dozens of species, how he had organized them, led them, given them hope when they had none. Lucas's parents were elderly but still strong. They cried when they heard how their son had died, but they also felt pride. Their boy had mattered. His life had meant something. He had changed the galaxy just by refusing to give up. Crix also brought something with him, a collection of testimonies from the freed prisoners. Beings from all across the galaxy had written or recorded their memories of Lucas Bennett. Some had fought beside him. Others had only seen him briefly. But all of them remembered the human who had given them freedom. One testimony came from a small, fragile species called the Minthari. Their representative, whose name roughly translated as Softwing, wrote, "I had given up hope. I was ready to die in that cell. But then I heard the human's voice on the communication system. He said to fight or die as slaves. I chose to fight. I survived because of him. My people survived. We owe humanity a debt we can never repay." Another testimony came from a Vorlaxian military historian. Commander Lucas Bennett displayed tactical brilliance rarely seen in any species. His understanding of warfare was instinctive, as if humans are born knowing how to fight and win. If all humans possess even a fraction of his capability, the Crithians are right to fear them.